It's time for a fan favorite segment. We're bringing it back. We've been doing DC in the 80s. And I know that people like that. But I know that at the same time you're going, but where's the one that I want to see? Here it is. Marvel in the 90s. And tonight, we're talking about X-Force #1, baby. That's right, by Rob Liefeld, Fabian Nicieza. Let's go ahead and get on with it because this week marks the 30th anniversary of this book, which also happens to be the second highest selling American comic book of all time. X-Force #1. Let's talk about it. First of all, Rob Liefeld comes in. This is spinning out of New Mutants. New Mutants was the bottom of the fucking ladder when it came to X-Men books back in the day, okay? In the early 90s, late 80s. Nobody cared about New Mutants. But Rob Liefeld came in and people started caring. He brought in Cable. He brought in Deadpool, Gideon, Domino. And then that led to the creation of X-Force, which was completely plotted by Rob Liefeld. This is a Rob Liefeld book through and through. Fabian Nicieza did the scripting, some of it a little wonky. This is some of the wonkiest scripting I've ever seen from Fabian Nicieza. We're only covering issue 1. I covered it for the 30th anniversary. This is what I read. We're going to talk about it. This shot right here, I think, is 8 from George Perez and Teen Titans, which I think was pulled from an X-Men book back in the day. But it's dynamic. I'm trying to understand what it was about Rob Liefeld that ignited a generation. It wasn't just Todd McFarlane. It wasn't just Eric Larson. Rob Liefeld had so much to do with this. He was a fucking rock star. Why? Well, first of all, look at this double page spread. As much as this is stolen from George Perez or Neil Adams or whoever the fuck, it's dynamic. It's got energy. It's got, dare I say it, backgrounds. Surprised me the amount of backgrounds in this issue. So basically the issue is X-Force teaming up, this new version of the team, spinning out of New Mutants, going after the Mutant Liberation Front's base in Antarctica, because that's easy as fuck to get to. But of course, there's some strife shit. So let's talk about Rob Liefeld yet again. Look at that top panel there. That's the anchor. All right? That is dynamic as fuck, okay? It's out of proportion. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. But it works, and it worked for 1991, y'all. This book came out in June of 91, and it just set people on fire. People love this. Now, one thing I learned recently through checking out cartoonist Kayfabe's YouTube channel, that's Ed Piscor, and his partner there, I can't remember his name, but they did an exploration on this. They were talking about how Rob would, because he inked himself at the time, okay? And they were talking about how he would do these thumbnails small, blow them up, and then do the finished inking over. And so a lot of the shortcuts you may find, especially say on the cover with the inking, like those, they like to say you can't call that hatching on the smoke there at the bottom, because this is something that seems like it was rendered smaller, blown up, and then finished. And that's exactly what it was. But it's dynamic, and it captured the impression of a generation. So basically, X-Force shows up, and Shatterstar's there. Now, I'll be honest with y'all, I've never read New Mutants by Rob Liefeld. I've never read that shit. I've never even read the first appearance of Deadpool. I've never actually fucking read it. So maybe I should. Maybe I should do my homework and read that shit first. So I don't know if this is Shatterstar's first appearance or whatnot, but it seems like he's a new character. And I'm going to be honest with y'all. When I was a kid, I thought Shatterstar looked cool as fuck. And super cool in this first issue, he cuts off this dude's fucking hand. Now, that hand is weird, and I don't want to keep going on the artist kayfabe thing, the cartoonist kayfabe story, but what is the thumb and what is the pinky there? I think the thumb's supposed to be the one on the bottom, but it's fun to like mimic or to mock Rob Liefeld's art nowadays, but y'all, this was the second highest selling comic book in America of all time. This shit was dope. One of the reasons why it's dope is shit like this. This is Kirby-esque. Now, Eric Larson's a big fan of Kirby, but I would dare to say that Kirby's a big influence of Rob Liefeld. Exaggeration. dynamicism, the dynamic energy being more on the forefront. When I recently watched the Image documentary, The Image Revolution, which is on sale right now at the Shout Factory website if you want to own it, but it's also available to watch for free on YouTube. It's an amazing documentary. Rob says he always cared about layouts, dynamics, how to make something pop and energetic. In 1991, this was energetic as fuck, bro. You look at other books that came out at that time, aside from maybe what Larson and what McFarlane were doing and Silvestri and some of the other Image artists, like nobody was doing shit like this. So it was a big deal. This is one of those annoying-ass double-page spreads where it's like a centerfold. You have to hang it out. You have to hold it open like you're looking at a dirty magazine centerfold or something. But, dude, it's dope as fuck. And not to harp again on the Ed Piskor video, but, like, bruh, like, they highlight the coloring. Lots of bright, vibrant, bold primary colors. Not something that was done at the time. There was a lot of drab colors in comics at the time. They didn't want to get too bright, too bold, too dynamic with the coloring at times. Not the case here. And you paint in those backgrounds, and it almost gets psychedelic at times. And no matter what the fuck you think about Rob Liefeld's work with anatomy or his exaggerated nature or his composition, which I think his composition is actually really strong. And I think that's one of the strongest bits, trying to understand what it is about Rob Liefeld that worked and captured so many people's imaginations. Part of it for this issue is the coloring, and part of it is that composition. That layout is, if somebody did that today, we would be like, definitely cool. It's Kirby-esque. It's something that was not done very often by many artists at the time. But I'll dare to say that stripe right there is dope as fuck. Thumbelina, not so much. But then this image of Farrell, to me, always stood out to me in this issue. Even I remember this as a kid. Everybody talks about their favorite bits in this, like maybe that image of Cable right there gets stood out. I messed it up. That image of Cable right there with the gun gets stood out a lot. But that image of Farrell, to me, really always captured me. Maybe it's because, for obvious reasons, but I think it's dynamic. It's got a lot of action to it. Look at the psychedelic nature of this color. Talking about the colors, look at the panel colors in the background. They're a computer screen, and it's a cheap way to get the background done by the colorist, but today they depend on colorists more so than inkers to get depth and dimension in these comic book pages. But look at the beautiful colors there. Like this, it really does pop. It really frickin' does. And we can poke fun at the way Cable's leg is right there. Like, it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. That's not what you're paying attention to when you're a 10, 11, 12-year-old kid. You're paying attention to the colors, the vibrancy, the energy, right? There's that shot of Cable that so many people love. And then I want to show this, a great shot of Domino. Boom Boom, I'm a big fan of, but look at Boom Boom's foot. Look at her right foot there. Look at the left foot. Look at the D. Yeah, it's awkward. But for some reason, when people think of this page, you don't think of that, right? And in the days, like, they were thinking, we got to sell original page art, and nobody wants a boring page. So every page has got to be exciting. And that's something that the Image guys brought in. So basically, the X-Force shows up. They are in Antarctica going against the secret base of the Mutant Liberation Front, the MLF, led by Strife. Then we get this cut to Gideon, who has recruited and is grooming Sunspot to kind of be villainous like him. And we got GW Bridge with the inward buckling kneecaps there and awkward bend at the elbow. But aside from that, still a pretty powerful page. And I don't know why everybody wears their pants so tight in the crotch in Rob Liefeld's world. But GW Bridge is working with S.H.I.E.L.D., and he's like, oh, Cable's back. And then Cable is chilling, and he's revealing a little bit of his information. We didn't know a lot about Cable at this time. I don't even know if we knew that Cable was the son of Cyclops at this time. We definitely didn't know he had telekinetic abilities until he shows them off in this issue. And Domino's like, yo, you can't be showing this. X-Force doesn't need to know. So they're building on Seekers. They're building on some big reveals that are going to be coming in Executioner's Song. And then Black Tom's part of this boardroom meeting, and it's involving Gideon and Sunspot And then G.W. Bridge talks to Nick Fury, and he's like, okay, we got to bring in Weapon X, which we know that means Kane. But it is the 30th anniversary of X-Force, so let's talk about it. So I got the copy right here. X-Force number 1. I pretty much covered it. I really think that it was the layouts and composition, even if it was completely ripped off by Rob Liefeld. You know, this is something that's prevalent in comic books, is prevalent in music, is covering somebody. But usually you have an after. He should have done that, to be honest with you. But, like, Cable looks goofy. There's so many parts of here that you can think look doofy. And they were pointing out that, like, you know, he did these on a thumbnail and then enlarged them and then finished them inking. But it leads to some weird stuff. And they were talking about, kayfabe was, well, Ed Piskor and his partner, they were talking about, you can see that he's using marker to ink some of these bits. And Marvel at the time was notorious for bad bleed on their pages that they would send. And you can see that in the inking, especially on bits like Feral's hair right there. That's a marker. It's bleeding over. And you can visibly see it. I'll be honest. Overall, I pretty much like the issue. I think it's pretty solid. Not a lot happens. And you're not going to X-Force looking for an intricate story or intricate character development. You're just looking for good guys versus bad guys in a big slam-bang WWE, or my bad, at the time, WWF type of way. And Rob Liefeld and other creators in that era who eventually went on to create Image, they were able to latch on to something that other artists and other writers and editors were leaving out. And that was a popcorn factor. And for a popcorn factor, this book sells and soars. And it's better than Youngblood number 1. We'll get to that later on in a few weeks. But I think the book is pretty solid. X-Force number 1, 30 years later, I think it holds up for what it was and what it set out to do. I think it set out to do it well. Rob Liefeld was a rock star. He was a rock star for a reason. We can laugh about it now, but there's a reason why this dude captured the minds of a generation. And I would overall give this 3.5 you digs out of 5. And that's Marvel in the 90s.